neuroscience major. And I knew I wanted to live in California because it's a warmer, supposedly warmer, not today, state. And I had a feeling I wanted to live in Northern California because Southern California just seemed a little too uppity for me. I needed a little more nature. And I heard Sacramento was the city of trees. And so I said, okay, city of trees, there's a piano teacher here who specializes in romantic era music and particularly Chopin. And so I flew to Sacramento from Wyoming. I took a piano lesson with this teacher and I said, yep, this is where I want to be. So I'm very, very grateful for this university because it allowed me to move here and find an incredible community. But more importantly, it allowed me to explore many different things. I came here for a piano teacher, but I ended up working in a biology lab and in a neuroscience lab and changed my major a couple different times. And those experiences are what really led me to fall in love with science and the scientific method. But more importantly, that then led me into technology. And so today what I'm going to take you through is a little bit of a music background, hence the name Orchestrator, but pulling in what's happening in our environment today with technology. So I have now worked in AI and data science for the past 10 years. And something stark happened to me on November 30th in 2022. And that was when I was playing around and chatting with ChatGPT. I realized very quickly that it was much better at a few tasks than I was. Some of those things were just simple, right? It could actually write faster than I could physically type, right? It was much better at grammar, and I have a bit of dyslexia, so it never got words or numbers or things like that confused. And while there were things that it wasn't very good at, what happened to me as I started to use this tool more and more, I asked myself this question of what does it mean to be human? Up until that point, I thought to be human was what I produce, the work product that I produce, my intelligence, right? I was able to, write a piece of paper or do a detailed analysis. And now all of a sudden, here this tool on my computer comes along and in some instances can do it faster and better than me. And so I started to have not an existential crisis, but I started to question things that I had never questioned before. And that was the basis of what is humanity and what does it mean to be human in a world of AI? So that led me to do an anthropomorphological study and go back in history and say, well, where have we come from in our human evolution? We as humans have been around for a while. How have we continued to evolve? What I realized was we grouped things into different ages, from the Stone Age to the Renaissance. And when I started to look at the ages of evolution that we've gone through, what they were always characterized were different tools. So in the Stone Age, we created hand axes and spears and bows. And then in the Bronze Age, that allowed us to develop more advanced writing system. In the Iron Age, then we developed agricultural tools and techniques, leading all the way to the Renaissance, which is my personal favorite age because we created the printing press. And for me, the Renaissance is really the first age of information. We were allowed to create information and now distribute it between societies and communities. And so as I took kind of a 1,000-foot view back and looked at this, I started to see a common pattern. And what I realized is that what we as humans really love to do is we love to create. We create new tools. But what's amazing about the tools that we create is those tools then allow us to evolve. And so there's this really beautiful cyclical process that happens as we create a tool, maybe it's an axe or a bow, and that allows us to gather in tribes more. And then as we gather in tribes more, we say, hey, maybe there's a better way to create food supply, right? And we create agricultural. And so what I realized is there's this beautiful process. We create something, and in our own creation as humans, we evolve. And to me, this is what makes us as humans a lot different from other species. That being said, I said, okay, we left off at the Renaissance. Are we still evolving and creating? And what's different about that today? And what I found is today we characterize not just ages, but we characterize it based on industries. So Industry 1 is where we created machine power and steam power, all the way up to what we're living in now today, Industry 4, moving on to Industry 5, which is the internet and cyber physical systems. But what was really fascinating to me when I looked at this was how much time has shortened in between each of these ages. So if you were born in Industry 1, not only did you not live 120 years back then, but you would not have seen Industry 2. And so the rate of change was much slower. Whereas today, not only do you live through Industry 4 to Industry 5, but more importantly, this is also within your career. And so while we're continuing to create new tools and we're continuing to evolve, the rate of change of how we're evolving is increasing. And that being said, we have to start to think about what this means in terms of AI and in terms of intelligence. So I love to predict the future, or not predict it, but take guesses at the future. And I like to find people who made a prediction about the future, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and see where they are today. This is a chart that was developed in 2004. And it's a very simple chart where it says, hey, if we just take the calculations per second per $1,000, what's going to happen is it's going to get much faster and it's going to get much cheaper. And we'll be able to have so much computational power that we can have about the same computational power as one insect brain, one mouse brain, one human brain, and then all human brains. Where that leads us is if we look at about where we're at 2024, 2025, we're in between one mouse brain and one human brain. And for a lot of people, this may be surprising that we have reached this scale, but more importantly, what's happening with this chart is we're on an exponential curve, right? So when we think about how change is evolving and what's happening, we're on an exponential curve now, not just with change in our environment, but change within how we think about intelligence. And to provide a little bit of context, we have many different ways for how we measure models and what those look like today. So this is from 2023, so about a year ago. This is looking at the GPT 3.5 and then the GPT 4 model. So in the green, you have 4, and then in the blue, you have 3.5. What's down here below is a list of different exams. So you have AP Environmental Science, Art History, Psychology, US History, where we saw within a year later, by just updating the model, not only was it able to perform better on the exams it was before, but now is able to do things like AP Physics, Chemistry, English Literature, and more coding tasks. And so we can see that within a year, something that I couldn't learn in a year is I could quickly go from passing a few AP Art History exams to now also passing AP Physics exams. But then we speed it up to where we are today. And what's happened today is we've started to measure now a lot of these models based on IQ tests and IQ results. There's a lot of issues with IQ tests and IQ results. I won't go into that. I'm just using this as a standard of measurement. But what we see here is now we've started to have models that are much above average IQ. So average IQ is at 100. We tend to see, for reference, like a lawyer typically has an IQ between 110 and 120. So if you think about professionals and professional degrees, they're a little bit on the higher end. Now from GPT 3.5 to 4 to now the newest model 01, we're seeing intelligence roughly at 120 IQ points. So what does that mean? Does that mean you should stop going to school? We're all cooked, AI is gonna take over. It doesn't mean that actually at all. What it means is there's a lot of opportunity because of the cost of compute is getting cheaper and we have this intelligence at our disposal. So just on kind of a global scale, it's estimated that because of this intelligence, we'll be able to add about 13 trillion of economic activity to the economy. And on a global scale, 1.2% of GDP growth. Now, how many of you here are actual students and currently in school? Can you just raise your hand? Perfect. When I was in school, I didn't realize I was in school when we had an economic crisis, and I was completely oblivious to that because I didn't care about that. So when I was in school, unfortunately, I didn't care anything about the economy. I didn't care about GDP growth. I didn't care about how much trillion we were going to add to the economy. It wasn't something I thought about. I didn't realize we were even in an economic crisis in 2008 until about 5 years later, people told me we were. I just thought it was the normal, typical environment. So if you're in school today, I'm going to tell you the reason why you care about this is the better that the economy is doing is the more likely you are to get a job. I didn't realize that until I got out of school and found it very difficult to get a job. So what we want to see is we want to see businesses growing and thriving, because when businesses grow and thrive, it means they can hire more people, they can pay higher salaries. So what do we see in terms of businesses that are growing and thriving? So when you're going to get a job, what you want to do is you want to find a business that's not only hiring, but you want to find a business or create a business as an entrepreneur that is going to thrive and not just survive. And so what we see is that not only are those who use AI in their business have a much higher increase in their cash flow, but to me, what's most surprising about this study is that those who do not will eventually slowly start to die. So those who use AI and are front runners, yes, it makes sense. They're going to have 100% increase in cash flow. What's more concerning to me is that those who don't adopt it, the gap between those who do and those who don't will be so drastic that they won't be able to keep up. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking, how do I have a competitive advantage? This is something that you want to add into your business so you have a competitive advantage. Or if you're going and looking for a job, then you want to find companies who are leveraging technology in a way that makes them have the ability to be able to survive different economic downturns. So what does this mean for us as an individual in terms of how we work? Well, we talked about how not only are things changing much more rapidly, but work is also evolving. And so one of the main things that we see is there's a shift in terms of the tasks that are done by a machine and tasks that are done by a human. What we see in 2022 is roughly about 34% of tasks are done by a machine. And a machine can be a broad scope of things. A machine can be everything from an actual physical robot that you would see in manufacturing, to a machine could be an AI agent on your laptop that's helping and assisting you. Where we expect it to be in 2027 is almost half of the tasks that are done will be done by machines. So what does this mean? When I tell anybody this, their first thing is, does this mean half of workers are going to go away? If all these tasks are going to now be done by a machine, does that mean we aren't going to have a job? And the story is actually much richer than that. What the story is here is for each of these little dots, each of these dots represent 1 million jobs. On the blue is the lost jobs, the yellow is the stable, and then the red is the new jobs. What we do see is there will be jobs that will go away due to this automation. But the story is much broader because there will be more jobs created. So roughly estimates, 85 million to 97 million roles. The issue that we see here for many people is most people can't go from a blue job here. It's a touch screen, that's cool. High technology. Most people can't go from a blue job here all the way over to a red job. So what happens is we have to do a lot of work to have everybody just shift over one, right? Maybe you don't go from being a truck driver to a senior machine learning engineer, right? That's probably not the easiest path to go. But you could go from maybe being a data entry analyst to being a machine learning engineer. And maybe you go from being a truck driver to essentially being an overseer and operator of the trucking systems, right? So what we see is there's a lot of opportunity, but we have to be very strategic in how we upskill and reskill. More importantly, this is not new. The evolution of how jobs have been changing has always been happening. And one of the things that we see is in 1940, over 60% of the jobs that we have today that people physically work in did not even exist. What gets brought up and talked about often is the role currently of the content creator. When I was growing up, that was not something that you could aspire to be. That was not even a job description. Now it's something that most kids want to be, right? And so what we see here is a lot of these, the tricky part of this is most of these jobs, we don't even know what they are, but we know that they're being created. So what does that mean? It means that roughly 44% of workers' core skills are expected to change in the next 5 years. From a student perspective, what it means is, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're never going to be done learning. So your learning journey is going to continue on forever. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't go to college and university and get a degree. What it means is you should learn how to learn in university. And you should take those principles with you, and you should carry those principles throughout your life, because you're going to continually need to update those principles. But most importantly, where we're at is we have to start to shift our mindset in the way that we work. So one of the things that I also noticed as I started to communicate more with AI tools like Claude, ChatGPT, is I had to shift how I was working in a stance of being a musician in the orchestra to being a conductor. So the reason I say that is, as a musician in orchestra, we see somebody who plays the violin, and there's usually a first chair, a second chair, and it goes down the line. Then we also have the cellist, and we also may have the trombonist. And we have all these people playing a simple part in the orchestra. We see a very similar structure within a corporate organization, right? You have your finance team, and you have a VP or a director of that finance team, then a manager. All of those are your first chair, second chair, etc. But what happens when we start to use AI is AI can be the role of maybe that fifth chair violinist or that fifth chair financial analyst. And so it allows people to move up the stream and go from being just a musician in the orchestra to actually being the conductor. And that's one of the key points that I started to notice is I now had this tool at my availability that could work for me as an analyst. It also worked for me as a content creator and helped me write blog posts. It also helped me design different strategic plans. And so what I noticed is I went from being an individual musician to conducting AI and telling it what to do as I was the creator. Another way to think about this is you go from physically writing to actually just narrating your story. Or for what most people find, you're going from doing the task to asking something to do the task for you. And so this is a big shift in the way that we work, because what I found is, for me personally, I was so used to creating everything from scratch versus outsourcing and telling and conducting. And so we have to shift our mindset into the mindset of being an orchestrator. And what this orchestration looks like is orchestrating a combination of AI, but also orchestrating a combination of humans together so that we can either create the companies that we want to create or create the new solutions that don't exist today. So how does this happen? Yes, it all sounds great in theory, but how do we actually get there? Well, what we see is in most businesses, we're at a critical moment where not only are employees expecting AI tools to support their work, but every company I'm starting to see is an AI company by default. And the reason for this is AI helps with all of your business processes. So no matter what your business focus is, it can help you with your core business operations, such as finance and accounting and your operations and your marketing. And so regardless of what your focus is as a company, every company is by default an AI company. And finally, what we see is those who are using the latest models, they have a competitive advantage. What we saw from 2013 to 2004 is a huge leap forward in terms of how much the model updated and changed. And so those who are using the latest versions have a competitive advantage. So what we see a lot of organizations doing from implement AI is in three areas. One, what I call this is building an AI workforce is really putting your own mask on first. So when you get on a plane, right, you probably don't listen to the safety protocol, but the one thing that I always remember is if you're traveling with somebody else, you need to put your own mask on first before you assist them, because if you try to assist them first, there's a likelihood you won't have oxygen and pass out, and then you're both done, right? So what this means is that building an AI-enabled workforce, before you put AI into your products and services, what you want to do is you want to make sure you can use it first yourself. The second part is, okay, once you can use it first yourself, then now how do we add it into our operations? And finally, how do we as entrepreneurs start to build it into our products? So what this looks like is an AI maturity model. So this is what we take a lot of organizations through in terms of how they can start to enhance their maturity. And what this looks like is, again, individual productivity. So starting with putting your own mask on first, right? Then you have team productivity, where how do we automate the tasks that we're doing as a team? Then you have the organizational impact. And so this is where you start to build some of your own AI agents. You may build custom GPTs. You start to have a knowledge management base, which leads you well into, okay, now that we have our own operations under control as a business, how do we now have customized impact, where we may build specialized models that we allow our customers to be able to use and create proprietary AI solutions along with that. This is very much a journey. I would say the majority of organizations are really within the individual and team productivity today, where the front runners are at this customized impact and proprietary AI. So this is something, if you're looking to build a company, I would embed into my own company. But more importantly, if you're looking to go and work for somebody else, you want to have an assessment of where they're at in their maturity. So I want to just share a couple of case studies. And this is one actually that I read just this week that came out. And it's about a study that was done using AI chatbots as doctors. And I found this study really interesting because there's a couple things in here that are different from other groups using AI. One, the first thing is ChatGPT, that's the AI system they use for this, scored 90% in terms of diagnosing patients, whereas doctors scored 74 to 76% in diagnosing cases. So we saw that the system was much better at diagnosing cases. What was fascinating about this study is that the physicians often resisted the insights from the model. And in some instances, they found that the physicians who they gave the model to actually would change their answer based on the model. So what happens, right? As a doctor, I may look at a case and say, yes, I think this person has a cold, right? We'll keep it very easy. But then I ask ChatGPT, it says the same thing. And what happens is I start to now question myself of like, well, if ChatGPT says that and I said that, maybe I need to change my answer. And so this is a big issue, is because oftentimes we think that human and machine collaboration is the best together, but it isn't always the best together. And so when we think about this, we have to be very careful in terms of how we collaborate with AI, and what, more importantly, what are the outcomes from doing that? I'm going to give you another case, and this is one that we did as an organization for a local city. And so what we did is we went in and we said, okay, they wanted to see where can we use AI and how can we use AI. And so what we know about AI is AI can do tasks, but not someone's full job. And so we took all of the job descriptions, we pulled out all of the tasks within the job descriptions, and we matched each of those tasks to AI systems and what it could and couldn't do. What we found is that for a sample of 80 jobs, there were a little over 1,300 tasks that were done by those 80 job descriptions. Of those 80 jobs, 79 out of the 80 jobs could use AI assistance. That being said, of those tasks, 35% of those tasks could be assisted by AI. What we saw is there were a lot of text tasks that they were doing, some analysis and code, and then some multimodal models, which was a combination of the two. So what we did, we had kind of this map of all the tasks that were done where AI could assist. And what we did was we went in and we provided training so that they knew how to use it effectively. Because what we don't want to see is instances like we saw with the doctors here, where they were given a tool that could obviously help them. It's very good at helping them, but they actually were worse when they used it. And what we found, though, in a business setting and in a business environment, and this is where things get really interesting, is that for business people, once they have training, they're 19 times more likely to report that it improves their productivity. What's also interesting, though, is from an employee standpoint, so when we look at knowledge workers in a business setting, they also report that using these tools make them feel happier about work. They're more likely to feel passionate about their work by about 29%. What's fascinating even more, though, is there's a new paper that came out, and scientists do not feel that same way. So this is a very interesting paper. It just came out this month about artificial intelligence and scientific discovery. What they found in this paper is AI-assisted researchers were able to discover new materials. They're able to increase their patent filings, and they were able to create new products and prototypes. So they had really incredible results, the scientists did, unlike the doctors, in using AI. However, which was interesting about the scientists is they reported a decreased job satisfaction. So I provide these three case studies, right? We have doctors using AI, we have office people using AI, and then we have scientists. What we see is the doctors and the scientists, while AI can have amazing results supporting them, they aren't too happy about it, right? Mm-hmm. They have a decreased job satisfaction. And then in the doctor's instances, they're also even second guessing. It's like they're fighting with the tool, right? Whereas on the, what I like to think of the lazy office worker side, they're like, hey, give me that tool, let it help me out however I can. I'm gonna enjoy my job a lot better. And so I share these three case studies with you because it's not a one size fits all, right? These are three very different professions that have amazing capabilities at their disposal, but how we integrate them into our workflow, how they work alongside of the machine creates very, very different results. So I want to just briefly touch on a couple things about mitigating risk. And the first one is the trade-off with the degrees of automation. And so this is a really good example in terms of what we see with the doctors. But the example I typically like to use is with self-driving cars. So what we see with automation, routine performance increases here. However, something we know in technology is the system is going to fail or shut down at certain times. And you can never have 100% uptime of a system. And most of the time, what we hope for is that they're called planned shutdowns. So you'll ever have that your computer says, hey, we need to go through an update, and it always seems to be at the time that you really need to use your computer, right? It's saying, hey, we need to shut down for a second. We need to update things in our system. That's what you want to happen, where it's a planned system update. What happens is when there are these planned system updates, what we call then would be like a failure to perform because it's offline or it's not available. When the human then needs to step in and take over from the machine, we're very bad at the handoffs from the machine to the human. And we see this within self-driving cars. Me and my husband just recently got a Tesla, and we were testing out the self-driving feature. And he said, you're going to use this in a talk, aren't you, afterwards? I said, yes, definitely. But what happened was it started to merge onto the highway, and it was doing a great job, right? There was nothing wrong, but it was scary. We weren't touching the wheel. Nothing was happening. And so what happened was he got frightened because it was merging onto the highway and increasing speed, and he started to try and take over and take control. And there was a second where the self-driving car was like, what are you doing? I got this. And he's like, I'm worried you don't have this. And because Highway 50 is always working on itself, and there's a lot of construction on Highway 50 and cylinder blocks, we almost hit a cylinder block, right? So what happened here is, in this instance, the machine would probably have been fine at that point, but there was a lack of trust from the human. And the human intervening actually caused more disruption to the system that actually created a danger. On the flip side of that, though, we know about the instance of the Tesla where the guy was playing video games and had it on self-driving, and he needed the machine needed him to take over, but he wasn't aware of the surroundings of what needed to go on to be able to come in and take over. And so when I think about how we're starting to infuse more AI into our world, and we're working alongside AI, what we have to be very careful on is the trade-off here of when either the system does not perform and the human needs to now step in, or when the human tries to step in and it shouldn't step in. And so that to me is probably one of the biggest concerns that I think about most often is, how do we make seamless handoffs between humans and machines in an effective way? And then the second area is that for a lot of organizations, we see a J-curve effect. So they're implementing this new technology. And what happens is anytime you do something new, you start to drop below what we call kind of the status quo. So what happens? You maybe want to make a change in your life and you say, okay, I want to start working out. All of a sudden you start working out and you realize maybe you are in less shape than you thought you were. And so it may seem like you're actually not getting any better because you actually have a measurement and a test. And so you're like, hey, I'm working out and I thought I was going to get in better shape, but like now I'm more tired, now I'm more sore. What we call this the trough of despair. If you're an entrepreneur, you'll go through like a million of these troughs of despairs and highs and lows because you're doing new things. But the key is to stick with it, right? So a lot of times we see people get into the trough of despair of doing something new, and they'll quit here, 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 here. What you have to do is you have to stick with it to be able to rise above it and to implement new habits to get out of those. And so my biggest recommendation for individuals is to make sure they're really patient with those payoffs. So when we think about how do we mitigate some of these risks, for most of us, what it comes down to is change management. How are we updating the way that we're thinking? How are we changing things in our organization? Or how do we integrate those new policies and procedures into our organization? Additionally, we have to have a continual and iterative feedback loop. I love the study from the doctors so much because I think it really showed an opportunity to implement AI with doctors much differently, right? We saw that those who used it didn't see the benefit that they should, and if anything, they got worse. And so making sure that we're measuring things and having that continued feedback loop so we can step in and intervene is key. And then finally, we all have to be continual learners. This technology is going to continue to evolve and going to continue to change. And unfortunately, it's changing very, very rapidly. And so what I encourage everyone to do is don't just be a continual learner yourself, but find a community of people that you can also learn with. So for me, to teach is to learn. I love teaching because it forces me to learn things. And I would encourage you all in this room to become teachers yourself. Teachers in the sense of like, hey, I just learned how to build a GPT. Now I'm going to go and show somebody else how to build it. Or I just learned a new prompting technique, or I just automated some of my systems flow. And so when you think about learning, I just encourage you to think about actually teaching others because it's a great way to create that feedback loop, to get more exposure to some of that change management, and to, most importantly, increase your continual learning process. Overall, though, I want to just briefly highlight a few things in terms of where we're headed. And particularly for each of you as entrepreneurs, this is the time to be able to build. It has never been a more exciting time to be an entrepreneur because of the tools and resources that we have at our disposal. When you're an entrepreneur, you typically have really small teams. You don't have a lot of funding, you don't have a lot of resources. What AI allows you to do is it allows you to almost have a third team member. And so it allows you to start to build products and services and bring them to market much faster. In addition to that, I think it's important that we start to change our mindset in terms of how we think about teams. The teams of today are, much like that orchestra, but this is the CTO and we have a bunch of engineers. Where we're headed to, and particularly for a lot of startups that I see today, is they're thinking of their team not just being the engineers, but being the AI co-pilots and being the agents as well. And so when you think about how are we going to build this, how are we going to scale it up, don't just think of the people resources that you need, but think about the agents and the automations that you can implement into your practice. Because where we're headed is just the tip of the iceberg. And, there's a lot of talk about AGI, artificial general intelligence. If anybody can find a common definition or one definition for what AGI is, let me know. But how we like to think of it in the AI world is in terms of not just general artificial intelligence, but also narrow artificial intelligence. So what this looks like is from the standpoint of narrow AI is when it can do one specific task or one particular area, whereas general artificial intelligence can essentially compete with any human on any task. So if we look at kind of where we're at today, from a narrow side, we're already at superhuman capabilities. We have algorithms like AlphaFold that can predict protein foldings and do things that humans can do, but it would take so much longer. So for a human, it would take them, their whole PhD to predict one of those. Now it can do it in a matter of seconds. Where we're at from the general artificial intelligence standpoint, we're at probably, I would say, this was from 2023. So I would say we're putting into level 3 of the expert level, right? And this just also goes to show how often you have to update things. So this is 23, we're in 24. We're already breaking into kind of level 3 here on the general AGI. But what that means is we're soon going to be at, if we continue the pace and rate of change that we're on, we're soon going to be at the virtuoso and the superhuman level. And so when you're building your products and services, don't build for where it's at today and be like, oh, there's some flaws within the system. Build for where it's going, because right now we're going through each of these brackets almost in a year time frame. And so make sure that you're building out your products and your services with a matter of where things are headed, not where things are today. But what makes me most excited about this is as we start to, finalize at expert level, but more importantly, approach a virtuoso level, it means each of us have this knowledge and capabilities at our fingertips. And that to me is really, really exciting to think that we have a system who has almost this infinite intelligence that we can use and create new products and services is a really, really exciting time. And most importantly, I think it's an exciting time because it allows each of us to get into the role of the driver's seat or of the conductor seat. Driver's seat's probably not a good term because AI will be driving us here soon. So, but it allows us, most importantly, to become that orchestrator. And when I think about the future, those who are going to succeed in the future are the ones who work alongside of AI and not against it. And the reason for that is, just in the case with the doctors, what if some of the doctors actually figured out how to work effectively with AI, where they could take the 90% accuracy results that the AI system had and add on to it? Those are the ones who are going to succeed in the future. And for me personally, this is the most exciting time to be an entrepreneur and to be a creator because you have access to these tools and technologies at your fingertips for probably one of the cheapest amounts that I've ever seen it be. And so what I encourage everyone to do is, I know there's a lot of fear in the environment in terms of, is AI going to take my job? Will I have a job? And I see more so there's a ton of white space available, but the white space is available for those who work alongside AI and those who can figure it out. And so what I encourage everyone to do is find your passion area, whether that be fashion or whether that be sports, and see how you can work alongside AI to create that new white space, to be able to be that orchestrator, and most importantly, create the future and the products and services that the world needs, because it wouldn't be put on your heart and in your mind to be able to create it, because it's going to be a bright future, and I'm excited to see what each of you create alongside of AI. Thank you.
All right, we have about, are you okay taking like 10 minutes of questions? We have about 10 minutes for questions. I will run the mic just so everyone can hear.
So I have a question regarding we're in a paradigm shift. Mm-hmm. So we're in a time where this new technology we're seeing it grow and develop in real time. And what I've noticed, I was actually talking to Cameron before the presentation, really good presentation, by the way. That was great. Have you noticed people, or would you say that this implementation of AI, would it change people's, I'm trying to figure out how to word it. I'm in school. So if I'm in school and I'm using this tool in my day-to-day life, would you say that makes me more likely to, is it possible to be too reliant on it? Mm. So you have people from the past who had to rely on nothing but their own brain and their own personal resources to get by and to move about through the world. Would you say that in the future, because in the future, I'd imagine every student is going to use this, every student is going to be using a more advanced version of Grammarly or ChatGPT 7 or 8. They're going to have this machine doing their own coding homework or their physics homework or whatever homework they have. Would that do you think that's a detriment to society at all? Like, it's going to make less intelligent people, I guess?
Yes, that's a great question. I think a lot of us don't 100% know, but the example I like to provide is in terms of our phones, right? Does anybody in this room not know where their phone is right now? No, everybody here knows where your phone is, right? The second that it's not attached to me, and I know mine's sitting over there, right? We start to freak out. We're already 100% reliant on technology, our phones today. Now, that being said, you asked, is it a good thing or a bad thing? No, we know that like phone addiction and social media addiction is terrible, right? We know that it actually causes a lot of harm. And so I think we're going to see very similar things on the AI side of things, right? Yes, it's going to be just the standard of how we function and operate in the world, just as we all function and operate with a phone today, right? Will there probably be some downsides to it that we have yet to fully determine? 100%, right? So I hope that answers your question.
It's really, from what I'm gathering, it's just a matter of how you use it.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
So, based off Rome's question, right, and the data you provided with the doctors and how they didn't want to take the solutions that, ChatGPT was providing on the diagnosis, I think what we're going to start to really see a bit more of is honestly a bit of an imposter syndrome, if you will. A lot of people tend to believe, especially if you're a high functioning, very intelligent individual, right? It's going to be difficult to, I guess, say, view this, tool, right, as either more competent or as competent as you, right? And I think for me, I like to use chat just to enhance and refine my work, because sometimes, I don't always have all my thoughts scattered, right? I just put it all out there and I just let it like cut it up for me, right? But some individuals who believe that, okay, or like to, have complete ownership of their work, right? It may be more difficult for them to release or levy the fact that, the same tool is just as competent and or better than they are, right? And I think that's where the future is going to sort of deal with right there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. That's how I started with my question of like, what does it even mean to be human, right? It had me questioning some of my own humanity. And I think for a lot of people, one of the challenges that we'll face for us as humans is what is our purpose? And I think that's going to be a question that comes up more and more. We saw it slightly with the doctors and the scientists where they put so much time into their education and now this tool just comes out of the blue and can do their job for them. What is my purpose, right? And so 100% agree. There's going to be some deep questions we'll need to answer.
Hello. So you talked a lot about the workforce and the evolution of work in society over like the length of time that humans have existed. And you were talking specifically about how that shift is going to move this way on the scale with the introduction of AI. And so I'm just curious on your thoughts, or I guess like any studies that have been done on what that will actually look like. Because if you start to implement people in an upward way, right, instead of like the truck driver, you said they become a analyst or a orchestrator, right? What is to prevent a business or a venture or a project from becoming too top heavy then, if they're all in a elevated position, right? And so then are there too many chefs in the kitchen, kind of like that kind of metaphor, right? Like how do you move forward if they're all in the same spot is, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's already really hard to get an entry level job. I think it's going to be even harder in the future to get an entry level job. So this is a theory, right? That in the future, we're actually going to probably pay for apprenticeships, right? Just to get experience or maybe there will be simulations that we go through because yes, so much as you mentioned are going to move to more of that kind of high level management. We see it a lot with like automations of different docking systems. So in China, they have people who all their docks are automated and there's robots and things, but they have people sitting in rooms and it looks like they're playing video games. And I actually tell people I think playing video games is going to be a very good skill to have in the future because they're all just these operators and controllers, right? Moving these pieces around that looks like Minecraft, but it's actually real life that they're moving. And so, yes, I think it's going to be much harder to get entry level jobs in the future.
Sadie, thank you for the presentation. I found it very insightful when you talked about human evolution and how they're defined by the tools. But my question is, keeping in mind that there's students here, what are some of the sectors or careers that students should be looking at to know if a company is adopting AI integration?
Yeah, so I like to, if I'm interviewing with a particular company, just to search that company name and then click on the news tab to see any of the latest news releases. Typically, if they're doing things within technology, they love to do a public release about it and share that. The other side is definitely finding like your network and talking to people. But I would also say, be open to coming into organizations and also teaching them, right? So there's a lot of older organizations that want to transform. If you feel like you're one of those change agents or can be a good change agent, there's a lot of people who think that just hiring young people is going to give them new technology. So there can be an opportunity for that as well. So I don't want to discourage people like just find the new companies who are great at technology. If you get a job and maybe they don't have the best tech systems, that's an opportunity area for you as well. So you can go both ways, but I would say either look in terms of kind of news cycles and what's recent of what they've announced. Plus, it's going to be great in your interview to talk about it and be like, hey, this is something you are doing. But I mean, I got my first job because I was talking about learning data science in a time that it was fairly new, right? And we talked about taking classes on Coursera, even though I was out of school. So there's a lot of opportunity. whether it's a tech company or you want to change from the inside.
So I apologize for being late. It's really hard to get a parking spot on this campus. Really hard. So what I saw of your presentation was fabulous, and a lot of this work I'm really, really fascinated by as a really old person. What I'm really concerned about is the bifurcation of our society. As an educator, I've seen schools, implement one-on-one. I've seen phones come into schools, and I've seen students and families use these tools in a vastly different way. Some for entertainment, some for knowledge and opportunity. So there is already a digital divide and already an opportunity and access gap. This only exacerbates it because the kids who are using AI to get their answers are not the kids who are constructing AI to do things for them. And so this just makes that worse because they're not learning those same skills. You talked about training for employees to utilize it, but the folks who need that training are usually the folks who aren't getting it. So how do we have systems that make it equitable for people to have access to the kinds of knowledge and information, open source this information and open source that knowledge so that we're not leaving huge segments of our population behind, i.e. Black and brown people who aren't technically or who aren't typically having that access, having that information, or being plugged into programs and opportunities where they're going to get that.
Yeah, so one, I think there's more of a need for that now just because of the rate of change, right? So, as you mentioned, phones and computers and stuff. Yeah, that came in. I got the internet in a CD in the mail, right? It was slow, right? Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we've gone through change before, but again, the change is happening much faster. So when it happens faster, that divide is going to go much quicker. And what we see in technology, unfortunately, is yes, you can learn about the technology, but getting into those jobs and using it effectively is typically who you know. And so that's why we see the same group of people always leading companies or in those leadership positions. And so that's where we have to have a much more strategic focus and investment much faster because the rate of change is happening. So completely agree. I think one of the things I've heard, if you're an entrepreneur, people have brought up like 3 different problems here today. Everything from like, what are humans going to do? How do we solve the digital divide? What about too many people in management? Entrepreneurs, the problems are what you want, right? Problems are what you solve. So like for anybody in this room, there's a lot of opportunity because it also, while there's opportunity, there's also new problems that we have to solve for because of it.
Bill Gates is Bill Gates because he lived next to GEW. He could sneak into the
All right, we have our last question here.
I'm lucky then. Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. Something that I heard, which was exciting for anybody who want to be an entrepreneur, is far as the exponential growth of the bottom line. But have there been any comparative study in reference to that labor market as whether or not their bottom line actually exponentially grow parallel with the bottom line, the corp in the company? Because when you're trying to attract people to work for you, that's what they're looking for to hear. It's like, hey, it's not that the company just growing, but the workers is actually, their bottom line is growing also.
Yeah, I would say it's still early days. I haven't seen any new studies out recently, I would say like in the past 2 years, right, to see with ChatGPT into the environment, do those who use it make more money or similar tools? I haven't seen any studies on that. However, what I do typically see and what we have seen in technology just in general is many people want to come in and work for tech companies because Google pays some of the highest salaries, right? So there's still, I think, more to be determined in how that translates to individual employees. But so far, I think that it's going to be on a company by company basis, right? You may have a company who has increased cash flows and you have a CEO and a board who take it all and give it back to their shareholders and treat their employees like trash. I know another company who's taken that and he's, raised the salary of everybody, right? So I think it's also still going to be on a company by company basis in that standpoint.
All right, well, that's all we have in terms of time. So great questions. Thanks for bringing it in. Let's give Sadie a round of applause. So thanks for joining us this morning. So our next session will be here at noon. We'll be talking about the circular economy and kind of what that ultimately looks like in our region. And if you're in the class, Chris has a quick update for all of those that are not in the class. Feel free to walk about, or as Laura would say, move about the cabin. But again, thank you, Sadie, for your time and energy. And I'll give you a quick announcement. If you want to use the mic, you can. Or
I don't need the mic. Hello, for those who don't know me, my name is Dr. Christopher Rogers. I am teaching a course right now about invention education, particularly understanding how to engage in inventing through a very sociological lens. What's it look like when you start to build and create from very humanistic need and what that means moving forward, right? There are a lot of students in this class, but normally we have class right now. And if they're in my class, they know I'm not really good at peeling the layers back or telling them the whole full story, right? I let them figure it out by themselves, right? And each student, and you get kids talk to them, they're building and creating new inventions. They're engaging this entrepreneurial cycle currently, right? And I love your presentation because for you guys, and particularly if you're in my class, you saw a few themes that have been present all throughout the semester. One, teams. What's it mean? One, it's not just, as you always tell me, it's not just engineers. It's not just engineers. So glad other people are telling you that other than me. It's people come together with diverse backgrounds, trying to solve various problems. And you guys are all trying to solve various problems. And another layer that I'm trying to peel back and teach you guys is what the future of the job force looks like, right? And trying to show you that what jobs are going to look like in the future isn't always going to be cookie cutter, thank you, cookie cutter, right? That follow a particular major. That if you're in the social science, you oftentimes think it's going to be policy, community engagement, it's going to be kind of social work, but it's going to be more focused on technology and how do you use technology into that, right? And so even for you guys in this class, you guys just didn't learn or explore, say, sociological issues. You learn how to innovate through technology as well. What's it mean when you guys go in the job market and they ask you, well, how have you used AI? Or how have you used technology? You can talk about this class. Talk about the things you are inventing right now. Talk about the things that could lead to future patents. Talk about the skills that you have developed from Arduino to, coding, so forth and so on. A larger part of this class, other than engaging in invention, entrepreneurs, is for you to grasp and understand the possibility of how you market yourself. The job force is difficult these days, and with technology and AI, there's so many uncertainty. And for you to recognize how to use this class, it could be open the doors to things you don't even know. Similar, I know so many people with a social science degree, they say the qualitative methods that work for like Google or Apple or you name it, the big tech companies. And you have met people throughout the semester so far that constantly tell you the skills and how you engage in problem solving is the key. Just understand how technology fits into that matters, right? So it's like peeling the layers back. I don't tell you guys everything as you know, but you start to see it slowly and surely, right? And that's the whole point. So, I guess I'll see you guys. If you're in my class, I'll see you on Thursday. What's Thursday again?
we have a panel on innovation in the healthcare industry. So
There you go. Well, I'm concerned for my students, but, I'll see you guys.
all right, thank you all.
Thank you.